The brushes I'll be using for this demo are the standard charcoal block from Procreate, which I love this brush. It's incredibly blunt, but I like that aspect of it because it forces me to be simple. I also have one that I've tweaked that would allow me to get the thick and thin using the stylus, but I want the blunt quality of the actual brush itself as they originally envisioned it. So, and then the other brushes are Big Sumi, Snakeskin, Palm Frond, and Palm 2. I'll be loading the Palm Snakeskin brushes up. In order to create a brush in Procreate, it's very simple. First, what I'll do is, instead of like tweaking out a brush to basically do what a lot of my other brushes do, I'm going to duplicate a brush. Okay, and then if I tap again, it takes me into the attributes. So you can see like stroke, shape, grain, dynamics, general attributes, and then here's how you would drag a texture and a grain in. So I'm going to keep their shape source. In this brush, Sumi brush, what I used was I did a photograph of using my iPhone and a macro lens of a dry docked boat, and I shot the barnacle off that boat. So what we're going to do is select a grain from my photos, and we're going to go to textures, and you can see these various textures, and what I've got here are just to sort of show you, these were the way the color shots were the original shots, and then what I did was take them into another program and flip them to, using curves, flip them to solid black and white. Let's grab this just for fun. So I've selected a new grain, and you can see it here, which is a close-up using the macro lens again of a palm frond. And then what's interesting is I can come in here and rotate this if I want, and you can sort of see the changes that this would make happen on the brush. And then if you tap it, it can go to a negative. And then again, you can rotate to see if something suits you. And again, I'm not tweaking this out like I normally would, but it does give you an idea. Here's some of the others, like Snakeskin was a honeycomb from a wasp nest on my property here. And the palm fronds are those. This one is interesting. Tap again, takes me into the grains and things, and it's some bark, and then using again one of their shape sources from Procreate. And then what I'll do is give you an idea of how these look as I draw with them too, to give you an idea of the strokes involved. Okay, here are the brushes in action. Let's start with the Sumi brush. And Snakeskin. And palm frond. I'm using them at full opacity right now. Let's make this one a little smaller. Whoops, so much for full opacity. And now let's overlap, let's say, not at full opacity, but a red on some of these, just to give you an idea of what some of this will do. It's pretty fun. Go back to, like, here's the one that we just created. Let's make it. But I love how they build up and give a feeling of actual paint quality. Let's grab a different color again. Let's make it like a bluish. Okay. Again, let me. And every brush is also available in every tool. So yeah, let's use that. So pretend like we're gonna. Yeah, I was gonna carve out here. strength. Let me, not too subtle. Go back. Now let's grab this one. Anyway, let's add some light to this. Anyway, fun stuff. Living in New York, I would ride the subways. Earlier on, I was very much wanting to try and really capture what I was seeing. I found out pretty quickly on the subways that you don't have time. So it became a great way to learn how to sort of train myself to draw a little more effectively, because you had maybe a minute to 2 minutes before someone walked off the train. So you had to work quickly. That forced me to sort of loosen up, sort of get to the point. Like, what is it about that pose that is interesting to me? And it forced me to really kind of get after it. It was nice. They weren't always pretty, obviously, but it did train my eye to be much more direct. Hit this button. I can grab this and just move it around. And I love that I can treat it like a little piece of paper, you know. Like right now I'm in Transform Tool. Something Rembrandt did a lot was he would do what he called the dominant eye. And if I'd turned the head more, it would have been a little more interesting. But he would like center an eye on a canvas, and that would allow him to go ahead and force the head out of center, you know. The other thing I want to do is just for Goose, I want to go ahead and, like, if I just touch and hold this guy, you know, these edges, you can go nuts and just distort the heck out of this thing, and that's a lot of fun too. I like where it leads me and just lets me play. So I'm gonna mess around, and you can, if you hit this, you can skew also. So that's pretty fun, and then just beef it back up. I'm going to actually, let's see, what if we thin this up altogether? It's kind of fun, but I got to fix the skew. See how the eyes are kind of funky? There. A little fun. So let's say we're going to work here. It's not quite centered, but it's enough to get him off center, you know. I'm going to keep sort of playing with pulling out of this a little bit. And again, like I've mentioned, it's like the last thing I'm really interested in right now is detail. I'm just laying in values and shapes. So, and just keep playing with that. And I could go ahead, and I tend to not, as you know, as we've already seen, I have just one layer right now. The background layer, I don't really count as a layer necessarily. So most of my work is done on very few layers, which again I guess comes from my traditional background. You just keep laying stuff on, for better or worse, right? So anyway, so I'm going to keep laying out. What we can do is just for Goose, let's go grab some of this like a lighter color, and let's say we have more of a, you know, yellowish, Naples yellowy sort of highlight. And again, I'm not going to go too bright here, too light rather. I'm going to put it on the opacity down a bit. I'm going to keep using the charcoal brush, wham, see it's a little too much. And this pen you can actually program the buttons, so that can be the undo, and I can, if at the back it's a redo. But you can program them to do different things. This is the Wacom stylus. But I'm going to knock this back even more, and just sort of lay in some of these just subtle hints of light. And I'm not being, as you can see, I'm not being super careful. I'm going to start filling out the form on the head now. Try and make it feel more round. And one way of doing that is playing with temperature. So I'm bringing in some warms right now, as you can see. And what I'll do is those warms come forward, and then I'm going to start playing with cools along the edge. As you can see, I'm throwing edges, the cool down, and that's going to help that form roll over and roll back on itself. Right now it's a little punchy, but that's going to change. So I'll just keep messing with that, and you'll start to see the volume of the head become much more pronounced. You can also see that so much of this is a give and a take. I may put something down that's fairly heavy, and I'll come back and soften that with by erasing out of it or throwing a complementary color or something on top of it, just to sort of kill it and settle it down a little bit. And that process is constant, non-stop, just back and forth. Now I'm going to use a brush called Fine Hair in the brushes menu under touch-ups. I like this brush because it allows me to do sort of a striated stroke, and that allows me to create texture. I can weave different colors on top of each other, and the more of this that I do in conjunction with other brushes, I build up what feels like paint texture, even though it's just streaks here. Let's zoom in on that so you can really see that. Let me blow it up. You can kind of see better. Let's do like almost like an ultramarine blue and see what that does. And I'll just try that sometimes, just throwing in wacky colors. It all adds up, I like that these, the way that some of this will look in the finish. It does show up, and it subtly affects a lot of the other colors. It's a lot of fun. So even if I take like something as, which you would think would work too well, like a bright deep green, can look pretty good in here. Especially against, that's playing with a complementary against that, these reds. So it's a little much, but if it gets covered up later, it'll still pop in here. You could just for goose say, okay, well, let's add a layer. There's different ways of adding layers. You can hit the plus sign here in the layers palette, or you can also pinch and pull, and it'll add a layer, and you can hold and drag layers wherever you want them. And if you swipe, you can delete a layer. So, oops, I'll make sure we're on the right layer. We're going to go to 2. So, and they also have all the same deals as Photoshop, so there's multiply, linear burn, color burn, light and contrast, difference, color. So leave this one at normal. So again, we can come over here, and even though I may knock the opacity down, just this brush has a look of opaqueness to it anyway. But I like the look of it. As I keep adding even transparent colors, and they start to weave, of course, as the two transparents lay on top of each other, they become more opaque. And that alone starts to feel like paint to me, like paint quality, which is what I love about painting traditionally, is that I keep weaving transparent colors with opaque colors, and it really makes a big difference in the volume that I see just visually, as well as just the physical interest for me in the paint itself. So I keep trying to find ways to get more of that out of the digital process with this. And again, you know, I'm not a digital painter, so this is all new to me. So now I'm going to throw in starting to throw these darks in. You can see I'm being fairly linear with it, and that's going to get covered up, and other layers are going to come on top of that, other colors. But I like that it's kicking the contrast right now. And you can see how a lot of this other stuff has settled down, the colors that we were using. The more I start to play with my opacities and with my warm and cool. The dark is fairly flat, and I like the graphic quality of that. And we'll keep building with that as well. But you'll see more color will come in as we progress. Why I like the dark color on top of these softer passages is certainly, as I mentioned, for the graphic quality of it, but also because it's, you know, at some point you got to make a statement and throw some serious lines down, and it sort of punches the drawing out a little bit, which is good. Gives it something to kind of focus on, and you need some of those hard edges in the middle of all that softness going on, and each one needs the other really, because they enhance each other. Okay, now I'm throwing in some ultramarine blue in the eyes. Again, I love being able to zoom in like this and just add stuff like crazy. Flip the piece around like a piece of paper and whatnot. So I'm working the eyes a bit, grabbing another brush, using the charcoal brush again because, again, I like the texture. It makes a nice solid line. And that's going to be used to drop these pupils in here. There we go. My right eye still looks a little big, and I'll come back probably and mess with that later. Right now I just want to keep moving, adding more and more to it. And you notice I'm using the pen. If I hold the pen down, it pops up and I can just grab a color automatically. It will just pick up whatever's beneath it. Grabbing that other brush and working the nose a bit. Again, you can see I'm working warm and cool to help round that out, turn the nose, turn the form, and come back into these eyes a little bit. Let's see. Again, sorry about some of this color being blown out. I've had to shoot this, you know, outside, and it's a weird effect here. So I've had to do a lot of color correction, and it's as good as it's going to get with what I've got. There you go, grabbing that cheek color and dragging it underneath the nose. It's working pretty good. Again, warm and cool, grabbing a cool and dropping it underneath the other side of the nose to help turn that. I think I'll throw some of that same color into the eye up here, which will help. There you go. Deepen that socket, yet give it a softer feel. So let me go back and fix my eyes over here. A little warmth on the cheeks, that'll help out to give them body. Now bringing a warm into the mustache and beard, and work the nose up a little bit. Pull that out. There we go. And we're starting to get a lot more form. It's starting to feel more three-dimensional, sculpted a bit. Start working the eyelids here. And you can see I'm sort of bouncing around all over the place. And when I do that, I'll mix a color and go ahead and kind of start moving it around. What I've avoided at this time, I'm still focusing on the head, as I've not really played with the background, which will, when I do go to that, will help settle that head into that space. You can see that the more I keep adding to the mustache and beard, it starts to unify the head as a total unit. You can see it start to come together. And it's also helping to round out the features, you know, to give the head more of a, as I mentioned before, a volumetric quality to it. Now, building, just continually working on the eyes, nose, and adding a little more body to the mustache and beard, filling that out a bit. That'll help. Working the eyebrows. As you can see, the more I keep adding, it just starts to build greater feeling of paint and paint quality. So just keep building there, and then come along the edge of the face. Start turning the form a little bit with value. There we go. Putting some grays in there, some nice neutral tints. Again, temperature is a vital aspect of this. Deepening the cheeks a bit just to give it more roundness and to roll that form over. Still working the nose and eye sockets and such. So now I'm going to work the background a bit. I've speeded up the video considerably. It's on its own layer, and I'm erasing out of it and then going back on to the beard, as you can see, and jazzing that up a little bit. I'm going to throw some teeth in. They're going to get knocked back and sort of brushed over with the mustache. You'll see too, I begin to sort of reshape the hair and play with that as well, just to kind of work with the form of the head a little more, to give it a little bit more punch. Now I'm working on the tunic, giving it a little more body, so it'll pop out from the background just a touch. I'm going to work on the flesh a little bit, forehead and the cheeks, which will help set the nose a little deeper. And you can see I'm playing with warm and cool relationships, especially in the shadow areas, which will help turn the form, as I've mentioned before. Here too, working on the beard. And I want to kick the eyes out a little bit more as well. Got a storm brewing here, so if you hear thunder. Continuing to work the beard, I'm adding a little more to the neck line here, and the button and the tunic and all. But really what I'm going to do is play around with filling out the face a bit more, give it the flesh a bit more of a fleshy feel, pull out the ear, highlights in the eyes. I did a stroke on that nose that actually is kind of fun. It makes the nose feel a little more lopsided, which is kind of fun. That's really now adjusting the hair. So I thought it'd be fun to show you that the various layers. Obviously, you can see there's a lot more than what we had originally. Due to time constraints, I wasn't able to photograph everything outside of the pad itself. However, Procreate does generate its own film file of all the work that you've done, except you don't get to see the menus and the fingers manipulating things. Anyway, what we have here are roughly 7 layers, and I thought it'd be fun to turn things on and off and just show you what things look like, you know, there by themselves. I like to see how things sort of look at times, and it's neat because you can see how things sort of balance out and how each layer has its own sort of balance to it, which is kind of fun. I like just to see the various bits on and off. Let's see some more here. I like this one shot of just the highlights here. Pretty cool. And you can see again, like I mentioned, the balance of that is really interesting to me. Holds up on its own in a way. So what I'm going to do is turn everything back on, and to merge all the layers, I'm going to pinch them all together, and it then automatically merges. Wham! And there you go. Now I want to draw a pipe in here and add some smoke to that. So I'll use another brush of theirs, which is a standard brush under inking called the Ink Bleed brush, and you see a few different versions here, trying to find the right angle, and then I'm going to switch to my Sumi brush and the snakeskin brush to throw in some tone. And now for the smoke, I'm using one of the palm brushes, and I'm also playing with, you can see I'm trying to find the right angle on this, and then I'm playing with opacity, and then I'm going to distort it as well. See that everything is on its own layer. Smoke is one layer, pipe is another, and here's our merged layer from a little while ago on top of our background. Here's a close-up of the eye and the pipe and the way the smoke curls around the eye, which I like a lot. I could call this finished and could be okay with that, but just for fun, I'm going to wig him out a little more and distort him again and maybe throw some spatters of blood on him or something just to make him a little creepy, and let's see how that turns out. Under the deadline pressure, I didn't shoot this, but I did have the foresight to take a screen capture of the transform process, and here's where I left it, and then you can see the pipe didn't move. Now I'm going to bring it all back and add to the background and fill in the gaps that were left from the transformation. I'm going to speed this up a little bit, but show, then I'm going to work the tunic a bit, add a button, add some neck to him, lengthen his neck, and brighten up that tunic a little. And then I'm going to get back in here with blood splatters. Here I'm using a Flicks brush from the spray paints section of the Procreate brushes, and you'll see I do a couple of false starts and then go in and erase out the more egregious splatters, and I'm left with now our finish, which is what I call the depraved sort of camp dentist or something. But I also like the original piece that we had also, which is a more sympathetic character, and so both of them are kind of fun. Here's the more sympathetic guy. And anyway, I hope you enjoyed the demo.